Hi, my name's Sam Mickelson, founder of True Worth. We're a talent solutions business, so it's all about people. And that's why we created a podcast channel. We wanted to bring together members of our True Worth collective, our clients, candidates, generally anybody in tech that wants to come and talk about their experience as a person, products, platforms, or projects that they've been involved with. So you can find us on all of the normal podcast channels and platforms. Links to all of our socials are in the description. And of course, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you've got any feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much and enjoy the episode. Welcome, Jonathan. How are you?
Hi, Sam. How are you? Very well. Yeah, good.
Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day.
Yeah, my pleasure, mate. Yeah, absolutely no problem at all.
So listen, we're going to cover quite a lot, hopefully in the next sort of 30 or 40 minutes or so. But we've known each other for about three or 4 years now, I think. We did a sort of a webinar podcast a few years ago. And at that time, we were at MediaCom's offices in Leeds, and we were talking about advertising data. And we're going to talk a lot about that today, aren't we?
Yeah, well, like I said, the agenda is a good one. So whatever you want to talk about, we can go through. But yeah, I think we've got a good few topics lined up. Fantastic.
Now, I want to start with your background and how you got into data, and I think that's quite an interesting sort of topic for most people of how they started their journey in either tech or data. So, for those listeners that don't know yourself personally, do you want to give us a bit of a sort of an overview of your history and how you got into data?
Yeah, it is an interesting one. I always like to hear people's stories, how they got into it. It's always quite fascinating. Mine is quite similar to many people's, probably going back probably 9-10 years now. I was working at for an airline specifically, and doing kind of demand revenue analysis kind of stuff. And I really started getting into Excel in that role, just building like crazy Excel things and like huge dashboards in Excel and like automating everything and just loving that kind of aspect of the role. And then one day the digital marketing team kind of came knocking and just said, we need someone to do like web analytics, and we can't find anyone externally who wants to come and do that. So they said, would you want to come and do it? I was good with Excel and then blah blah blah. And so I did. I went and got into web analytics, and that was a completely whole new paradigm, whole new world, really. And about 4 or 5 weeks after I started that role, the manager who hired me into that role left the business, and so I was kind of left in the lurch as this sole kind of digital analytics, website analytics guy within this very large airline business. 2 big sites, a lot of traffic, a lot of money, and was just completely in over my head. And so, it was a baptism by fire, if you like. So that was a situation where they gave me the flexibility to learn the ropes. I think they understood that, and they were very good in that respect. And so about a year, it took me about a year to get comfortable with these new ideas, these new metrics, these new, the tracking on the website, the JavaScript code that we had, and understanding how the development side and the website development side kind of played with the business side, and all the reporting requirements and all these kind of things, and Google Analytics and how did Google Analytics work. At that time, it was still Urchin, or not Urchin, but it was GA.GS. It was the one of the original. I think it was the one after Urchin, but anyway, the one before Universal Analytics. And so there was a lot of customization you had to do in the code. GTM hadn't quite come out yet, so it was very kind of technical heavy at that point. So it was quite a steep learning curve. but I really enjoyed that. So my kind of introduction to web analytics and stuff was quite technical, and also like on the stakeholder management side, some very senior stakeholders requiring data, day in, day out. So it was a fascinating time. Had to really study and learn it by myself, essentially. There wasn't as much in terms of resource that you have now. Videos across YouTube, they didn't exist. All these chat GPT don't exist. All these things didn't exist. So it was books and kind of word of mouth and helping. So yeah, really fascinating. But I quickly understood that the potential of it and understood the importance of it. And then progressed through my career where it was, just climbing the ranks a little bit here and there, getting into conversion rate optimization a bit more, understanding various different sides of things, getting into the business intelligence side of things, and the reporting and the Tableau, and then into the data management side of things, where you have you're learning SQL and you're doing SQL and all these things, and it's actually a career progression that is kind of laid out for you in the technology. So you start with GA, then you need to do reporting. How do you report? Well, you can do it every day by pulling out a CSV, but what would be better? Or you can automate it. Well, how do you automate it? Now you need to know SQL. Now you need to understand databases, and so you progress that way. And that's kind of how it's always been for me.
And that's proper learning on the job, obviously. And I think it feels like 12 years ago, you could get away with that more so than you can now.
Yes.
And we'll touch on that a little bit later. But going back then to when you started, you were an analyst, or you moved into an analyst type of role, and then you came to the UK and you got a job with another airline, Jet2.
Well, that's the one I was referring to be honest.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, so that kind of, you were client side. You then went to Matalan, and that was again, client side. But then you got into the sort of media agency world with 7 Stars. And you were there for about 3 years. Is that right? What did you learn there then?
Well, a great move. If you ever have the opportunity to go and work for a media agency, I'd highly recommend it. It's a different kind of thing altogether. Very heavy on, obviously, depending on the agency, but this particular agency was a full service agency. So a lot of the focus being on the channel performance, so paid search, social media, that kind of thing. So as someone in analytics, in a role like that, you're very exposed to the way these channels work. Display advertising and all the rest of it. So very, very complex. I mean, the channels are, if you come at from a web analytics point of view, we kind of see GA breakdowns of the source medium and the campaign and the sessions and the revenue and stuff. But before you get to the website, all this other stuff happens, the impressions and the clicks and how those are working, and how those in the bidding and all the rest of it goes. It's very, very complex. I used to sit in meetings and listen to guys talk about how they're setting up their the programmatic display campaigns. And it's like it's a whole different world, but super fascinating. And one, if you're going to get into marketing analytics, which is, obviously huge, you certainly need to understand that side of things as well. So I think that was a really great intro for me to get into the kind of the marketing analytics and understanding what's important to the teams when it comes to channel performance. But then also, it's we were doing things like we were trying to get to the agency to become a Google certified partner, so we could be a reseller of GA360 and so on, and what that process looks like. And that's quite a difficult process. And, you have to do like 3 or 4 case studies with real clients, and then at the end kind of prove some kind of value at the end of the project. So that whole thing was quite fascinating. And again, at an agency, you're very close to the cutting edge, if you like. So yeah, great experience.
And then sort of fast forward a few more years, you then joined a FMCG business, GHD,
Yeah.
and you've been there for what, 4 years now?
Yeah, 4 years.
And how's that changed your role? Does it feel like you've gone back to what you were doing for Jet2 and it's a lot more client focused? You know, is it
Yeah.
easier or harder? What
Careful what I say there. Is it easier? I don't know. It's
different.
It's different. It's more like Jet2, I would suggest, in terms of client side role. It's very heavy on stakeholder management, but also very heavy on the day-to-day, so hands-on. So it's, you know, it's roughly 50% hands-on and 50% kind of strategy and stakeholder management, and just pushing the business down this maturity path, if you like, towards some kind of, you know, end goal. Obviously we have like a 5-year plan of where we want to be data wise, and what that looks like for the business, and how we implement that. With GHD, it's very interesting just because they are traditionally not an online business, even though we've had a website for sort of 10 plus years. The focus of the business hasn't been online until the last maybe 4 or 5 years, where it's considerably taken off considerably and is now a huge focus for the business. So it's very interesting to be part of that journey and that process and that kind of transition from an offline kind of focus to an online focus.
And I guess for you then, that's seen the rise of what we call analytics engineering, and as opposed to data engineering. So that's web analytics, it's advertising and channel specific data, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a term that you see more of now. Kind of more job roles are looking for analytics engineers, and I think we discussed this before the show. It's just, you know, whether that's a hard and fast definition or whatever that's been clearly defined yet. I'm not so sure. Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. But yeah, for us, we you know, in my head, I think about data engineers, I think about kind of guys working at Netflix and Google and Facebook and stuff, although that's not true at all. You know, there's data engineers everywhere. And then analytics engineers, simply we're just working with analytics data. So, you know, your website analytics data, your GA kind of 360 exports, and your Facebook social media data and all the rest of it. So that kind of thing. And how specifically, how do you join those dots? Because that's such a big part of an online business, is joining the advertising dots with the kind of the conversion side of things. So I think there's a lot of people with the speciality in that space, you know, who are very clued up on how GA works and how Facebook ads work and how you join all those things together. But they're also highly technical in the sense that they understand SQL, they know SQL, they know how to write those data pipelines. Maybe they're working in Google Scripts and then Google Cloud or whatever it may be. But their focus and attention is really on the advertising kind of data. At least that's how I see it.
And that advertising data then allows you to do things like real-time reporting. I think you mentioned that as part of some of the Black Friday projects you've been involved with. What have you found are the challenges faced when you're trying to implement real-time reporting then? Yeah,
I think, well, I think the thing with real-time reporting is, you know, do you need it? And if you do, then you need to plan it out a bit. But in a lot of cases, you probably won't even need real-time reporting. But for us, during a period like Black Friday, and for any FMCG, I guess it's important during the big sale periods, is that you have a view of how things are going intraday. So in the case of GHD, when we're covering, you know, 7+ days of Black Friday, it's a big period for us. And, you know, if we don't get off to a good start on day one, then we're kind of, you know, trying to catch up through the rest of the week. And so if you can spot early on day one whether it's going well or poorly, you have a chance to then put things in place for day one that you can, you know, make up whatever you need to do. So So we are able to provide kind of minute level activity when it comes to, sales on the website, traffic and things like that, where we can get a really good and clear understanding of other promotions we're running, are they working well, which products are selling, which products are not selling, and all that kind of stuff, which allows the guys who are running the campaigns and running the business and doing the trading a much clearer picture of where they are at any given time, and then their decision making is so much better as a result of that.
And previously, would you have done a campaign over a few days and then waited until the campaign's finished to see whether it was successful?
Well, yeah,
is that the difference now? You can,
yeah, because normally, if you have your kind of standard batch processing, which would be maybe a once a day. For a lot of people, I guess it would be once a day, and then by the time you've got to the end of day one and you're looking at the results for yesterday, today, then you've lost 24 hours or whatever it may be. So, and at that time, you're not as agile and nimble, I guess, to make on the fly decisions.
Okay, that's interesting. So data is really now empowering you to make real-time decisions and be able to move things around to optimize that spend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so talking then about, I guess, advertisers, you're getting people, driving them to the website, they're sharing their data with you. Have you found that there's a lot more different challenges now when it comes to customer data around privacy regulations?
Yeah, I mean, we could spend hours just talking about that. I think it's it's a situation that we're in that is messy at best. It's always been quite clear, and becoming clearer and more now is that I think people expect privacy and want privacy, and that kind of thing. So we have to kind of fall in line with that, and so we should always be. GDPR came out how many years ago was GDPR now? I don't even remember.
7 years, 8 years now. Yeah.
So that was one. And I think it was still misunderstood and is still misunderstood, and people have tried playing catch up when it comes to cookie management and cookie consent and things like that. And then you have the consent when it comes to more the CRM side of things. So you're giving someone your email address, and what are you going to expect in return for that, or what are you not expecting in return for that email address? So there's a lot of things moving on that side of things, and I think more than ever now, guys and girls and people who a web analyst, for example, is now like faced head on with these challenges around, with the business probably asking them, okay, well, are we GDPR compliant? How are we managing our cookies? And what is our consent management tool? And all these kind of things that they probably haven't had to deal with in the past, and are suddenly, spending hours talking to lawyers about. Certainly in my case, that's been the case. So it's a whole new paradigm for web analysts and technical folks, because ultimately it's a very technical thing. Yeah. Certainly on the cookie consent side of it, it's extremely technical, and that's a dangerous situation when you have guys and girls, big people who are potentially not used to talking to the wider business, or used to talking to lawyers and things like that, and trying to explain how things work. I've explained how like cookies work many times to legal folks who still potentially struggle with understanding exactly what's happening. So it's a real quagmire of mix of technical stuff, legal interpretation of stuff, stakeholder management, and at the end of it, like quite a difficult situation, because people are getting fined left, right, and center. If you look at what's happening in Europe and places like Italy, France, and Germany, a number of small cases, but they're cases where people are getting fined, or companies are getting fined for using Google Analytics, and there was a few months ago, there was a lot of people thinking that, probably GA at some point is going to be deemed illegal for everyone, and that we're going to have to switch off GA altogether. And there was a bit of a panic around that. And
Right.
yeah, so that doesn't seem to be playing out exactly that way. I think we'll probably be okay on that front, as long as we're putting the right bits of tech in place. And in some ways, we're very reliant on the big providers in that sense to do that for us. So Google need to give us the option to house our data in Europe, instead of having our data in Europe and then being transmitted to the States. And so we're very reliant on the tech providers to provide a solution for us in a lot of cases, which they are. GA4 is a step towards that. And it's still early days, but I guess we'll see.
I was going to ask you about GA4, that version. I think you mentioned there's been a little bit of controversy around the latest version of Google Analytics. It's a bit of a step change in its architecture. It's been rewritten from the ground up. Do you want for those for those listening who don't know kind of a lot about this change or Google Analytics, what does that mean to the industry?
Yeah, it's another kind of weird time to be alive in digital analytics in the space. GA4 has been around for a couple of years in one form or another, and recently did they kind of put a date on it where Google was saying you've got to be on GA4 by this time, which caused a bit of an uproar as well, just because it's such a big change. It's completely different. Generally speaking, the interface is different. The way you get to the data is completely different. The data itself is different. The way the data is modeled, the architecture behind GA4 is completely different. And a lot of that had to happen. Google playing a bit of catch up when it comes to some of the way that the data is modeled, but the way they've done it has caused people very familiar with one way of doing it for many, many years, suddenly kind of being asked to switch to something that's completely different is a problem. And so again, going back to the privacy thing, and some of those changes forced by the privacy kind of changes. So you can choose where your data is stored with GA4. You have various options around how do you handle the consent of users and how you manage the data behind that, and all that kind of good stuff. So there's more flexibility from a privacy standpoint, which is what we need. But the product itself is lacking. It's very buggy. Right. It's really not as nice and simple as it used to be. It's confusing in parts, and when you're migrating a big enterprise business, even if it's just 2 users, that would be a challenge. But if you're migrating an entire business, hundreds of people who've been using GA, for many years, it's a big change. Technically speaking, it's a big change. So you've got to recode your website, and then 2, you've got to retrain your users. Your customers who are using GA. So there's a lot to plan out there. We've been given a deadline. I think it's now July 2024 for the paying customers. So if you pay for the premium version of GA, for those who are on the free version, you've got about 5 months left. So if you want year-on-year data in GA4, you're about 6 months late. So you should have started 6 months ago with the migration. And if you're now just catching up, then you need to speak to someone ASAP to get GA4 implemented, even in the state that it's in. Unfortunately, that's the sad thing about it, because nobody really wants to migrate to a tool that's only half finished, which is in a lot of cases is. So it's a weird situation, and I think now more than ever, people are probably looking at alternatives to GA4, which there are some. Of course, Adobe Analytics is the other major kind of player in that space, but there are other smaller ones. I mean, there's another one called Snowplow, which is a completely different take on tracking. I won't go into it, but it's a different philosophy altogether, really, which is very interesting. And there are other kind of tools that have come up now that are marketing themselves as being, GDPR compliant and privacy compliant versions of GA, right? So that's all happening. Recommend anyone just go out there and start doing some research and getting ready for that, because it's very nearly.
So there's lots of changes coming then. People need to be ready. We know that in the press at the moment, lots of big enterprise businesses are making layoffs, redundancies. They're getting rid of a lot of people. I guess if you're a big enterprise business or you're a small organization and you're looking to deliver enterprise level reporting with a smaller team, what advice would you give? And have you been in that situation yourself?
I think, we all can't have, big teams of, going back to the engineering conversation, we all can't have big teams of data engineers and experts in cloud development and things like that. So, but what's great is that you can produce enterprise level results on, with either open source tools or spending a little bit here and there. So, at GHD, we don't have a huge team of developers and engineers that we can call upon to build everything out for us. So we do rely on some open source tools and on some pay for tools as well. But we don't spend that much. It's not a huge amount. And, we are able to put together, what I would call, enterprise level kind of business intelligence and reporting. So everything's automated, everything's real time as much as we can. It's all built out on clouds, we have extremely high levels of uptime with no disruption, and the level and accuracy of the data is super high all the time. So it can be done. I mean, they're definitely open. We use Tableau and we use Google Cloud Platform for do of it. And depending on the size of your business and your requirements, that can be a cheap option or it can be a very expensive option. Depends on how much data you have and all the rest of it. But there are definitely a lot of good open source and free tools out there. Google or Looker Data Studio, as it's called now, which used to be Google Data Studios, now called Looker Data Studio, is a free tool as well. That can connect to a lot of different media and web analytic platforms. So you can do a lot in that tool itself. So there's plenty of options. I think we won't go into all of them, obviously, but you don't need to have big teams of engineers all the time.
Well, if you're happy to share that, Jonathan, that sort of tech toolbox, if you will, we can put it as some links, or we can just mention them in the description on the podcast, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Brilliant. So we've talked about Google Analytics. We've talked about privacy. We've talked about real-time reporting. I've got to talk about and mention ChatGPT. It feels like a lot of people are playing around with it. I heard this morning that they're going to have a monetized version or a paid for subscription version, which will allow you access at any time.
Yeah.
But it feels like so far people are just sort of going out there going, oh, look what I've done with ChatGPT, and they've just kind of, it feels like they're just playing around with it. But you've actually started using it as a tool, haven't you?
In a sense, yeah. And by the way, I'm no expert on AI, so don't get your hopes up with anything meaningful coming out of me for this. But I see it as an amazing. When I tried it, when I heard about it and heard people were using it to write code, that's really what piqued my interest, because it's coding, writing SQL or writing some Python or whatever is something that I do and enjoy doing, but it's something I struggle with. So I'm not classically trained in and so I'm self-taught in that respect.
Yeah.
And when if you are like me and you're doing that, then you're going to struggle with things here and there. And what are your options? Well, you can go to Stack Overflow, right? You can go to Google, you go to Stack Overflow, and you could spend an hour looking for an answer, and still not find a very specific use case for you. You still have to take that example and try and mold it to your specific use case. But with ChatGPT, what it looks like is that you can basically ask it the question. You could copy and paste in some of your code and say, how do I fix this? And it's going to fix it for you. Or you can just simply ask it, write me a script that does X, Y, Z, and it gives you the whole thing. And then you copy and paste it from there. One thing I was blown away by is that when I asked it to obviously when you work in Google Tag Manager a lot with data layers and things like that, one of the things you're doing a lot is looping through a data layer and pulling out key fields from that data layer and putting it in like a comma separated list or some kind of list, and then using that in your advertising tags. And it's obviously we have templates for that, and we can write that code. But what was interesting when I asked ChatGPT, I said specifically write me some JavaScript that would loop through this very specific type of data layer and give me a very specific outcome, and it sort of does it in like 5 seconds. And you're like, if I had this 5 years ago, I would have probably saved weeks and weeks of work. So it's pretty incredible. I'm stoked to see where that's going to go and what happens with that. It's super interesting though.
Yeah. And then talking about tools that are obviously going to make your life a little bit easier. I guess a little bit of a segue into data visualization. It feels like there is a sudden resurgence in data visualization. I know that many years ago people were sort of still just getting their head around visualizing data using certain different types of charts and things. You were saying that you feel that that's kind of dramatically changed even more now since the pandemic.
Yeah, and even before the pandemic, data vizzing or visualization was becoming more and more of a thing. You kept seeing more and more roles that were specific to it. Now you've got whole departments that are just dedicated to building dashboards and visualizing data. And then with the pandemic, I think what was super interesting was just seeing that every night on the news, people up there talking about the data coming in, and then you were seeing these graphs and charts plotting the trajectory of the pandemic and all that kind of stuff. So super interesting to see that. It's just because when people ask me what do you do, one of the you struggle to kind of explain what you do a lot of times, certainly to people like my dad who still doesn't understand what I do. But if I can say, every night during the pandemic, you would see those charts, right? Well, where does that, how do you get those charts? Well, you got to get the data so you're collecting the data, and then you're analyzing the data and doing stuff, and then you're presenting the data out in this nice, beautiful picture. And people are interpreting the data and seeing it and very quickly visualizing what that means. And that's really the key to kind of data visualization, is just taking complex data and presenting it simply and visually so people can interpret it very quickly and easily. I think that's a really beautiful thing, and it's not a new concept. It's been around for hundreds of years in one way, shape, or form. But it's in our day-to-day now, we're using tools like Tableau or Power BI and everything else, and so that's become a career in itself, which is very interesting as well.
And that leads us kind of nicely into, people still saying that data is the new oil, but I think they've been having this conversation for, it feels like a long, long time, at least 10 years. Where do you see it changing? And is that still true now, or are we sort of, saying the same old thing? Is it going to a new level, do you think?
I don't know. I think, it's like boom and bust with a lot of things in the industry. I think, there's hype and there's there's whatever the opposite of hype is, de-hype, I don't know, unhype. It used to be, attribution used to be the big hype, and everyone would want to be doing attribution. And then as you get into it, you realize, well, this is really difficult, and the data is kind of crummy, and we can't really, we're not really using this data, and we're spending a lot of time and money on trying to figure this out. It's just, we're not providing any value back to the business. And I think what's good is people are learning that now. We, as an industry, I think, people are more educated and better educated, and it's definitely got a positive movement towards, what is the ultimate reason for us being here, and that is to provide value back to the business, not just to exist as a cool thing to do. So I think that message is more clear. And if it's not clear, then you need to make it clear in your own organization. But so it's for me, it's really just about not being fancy and flashy, but always trying to provide some value back to the business.
It feels like now, like when we were talking about the year of the mobile back in 2008, 2009, and there was a kind of like, yes, this year's going to be the year of the mobile in advertising. And then all of a sudden it really was, the game changed with 4G and the Apple iPhone. It feels like now with data that the technology is there to support it and to enable people to use it properly, so they can analyze a lot more data, and they can do more with the data rather than having to rely on on-premise servers. You've got GCP, you've got AWS, etc., and Azure as well.
Yeah.
Do you think that sort of AI is going to sort of like, are we at that same situation now with AI? Do you think are we at the year of the mobile in 2009? We're not quite sure what to do with it.
Yeah, I think there probably will be a period of what are we doing with this, and how do we use it? I think it's going to be unlike any other kind of position we've been in, just simply because the technology is that much more kind of powerful and unknown to how it works and exactly what's going on there. So I think we're getting hit in the face with this pretty big time, and anyone's guess as to how that's going to play out. Is it going to change the landscape? I mean, it's very interesting to see how Microsoft and Google Microsoft responded to it, how Google are going to respond to Microsoft. How is that going to impact Google search? And what does that mean for everyone really? It's pretty amazing. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I think it impacts so many different areas that it's hard to, at this point, kind of, for me anyway, is to see how that's going to pan out. But needless to say, it's an interesting time to be alive, for sure.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And one last question for you, Jonathan, and thank you for your time today. I really do appreciate it. I know how busy you are. One final question for you is, if you were to go back to, Jonathan 12, 13 years ago, just sort of starting out and looking at his career, what bit of advice would you give him, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I mean, on the practical side, probably I would go back and say, study statistics and physics, something like that, and try and get into the I was going to say data science side of things, but if I'm being honest with myself, I don't think I would enjoy that. Although that's where a lot of the the kind of the big paydays are. But that besides, I think your interests change over time. I'm at this point, I'm super interested in kind of the engineering side of things. So I would go back and say, get into engineering. But it could be next year I'm into something else, data vision, last year was really into the data viz side of things. And I actually love doing that. So I think, you change, be adaptable. I think where I've lucked out and will work very hard as well is just to be in different spots. So I'm pretty good with, the reporting, the BI side of things and data visualization. I'm pretty comfortable in terms of analytics engineering and understanding that space. And then on kind of team and stakeholder management and stuff as well. So if you can, try and just become indispensable in any way, shape or form that you can, and do it in a way that you still kind of get some enjoyment out of it and enjoy what you're doing. So, but there's really no hiding the fact that, we in data, it's a complex set of skills that, any kind of foundation in statistics and engineering would be super valuable.
And that feels like the same sort of advice that you'd give anybody that's looking to get into data then.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Go and do some courses. There's so many courses online now, it kind of blows my mind. Start there and see what you think, and then progress and get some experience under your belt.
Interesting. Jonathan, thank you very much indeed for your time today. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Sam. Always happy to do it.
And listen, I know that we could, on each one of those subjects, we could probably expand and have another just half an hour conversation breaking those things down. But today was just a real introduction to you, a bit of an overview on, analytics from an advertising point of view. And it was really interesting to hear about Google Analytics and how that's changed and all of the stuff we talked about today. I do thank you again for giving us the time.
Yeah, like I said, any time, it's my pleasure.
And I hope to have you back on one in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem.
All right. Thanks very much indeed, Jonathan.
Okay. Cheers, Sam. Have
Take care. And you. Bye-bye.
Bye.